We conclude the 19th chapter speaking about the nature of love of the divine soul. Its source is Chachma, Chachma above. Chachma, we translate as wisdom, but it doesn't really mean wisdom here. It really means that which is a vehicle for the infinite of God. And Chachma is made up of the word koachma, the power of what? It's humility, so it can contain that which is greater than itself, the infinite. Why is it? It's bittul, has that self-abnegation, has that humility, that it is completely subjugated or a reflection only of the divine. And that's the quality of the godly soul that we're talking about. Its love then is a love not to gain anything. Usually love, human love, is a love that is motivated by needing something to fill you, to make you more whole. This love is a love not to make you more whole, because it's the opposite. It's to be just part in your source, to be in your source, to be in the divine. You lose your identity. You don't become a bigger identity. Right? Human love, as opposed to godly love, is you feel better about yourself through love. You feel more fulfilled through that love. And that was actually chapters 9 through 17, that kind of love that we spoke about. Here, this is something beyond that. It's just wanting to be connected, not because you become more, but because that's the nature of that love. It's unusual. Doesn't exist in the regular context of the human condition. So, as a result, this is what defines what we say the Jewish soul. And what does that mean? It means that based on that soul, the only thing you want is an attachment or being completely subsumed in your source in God, in the infinite of God. But that doesn't necessarily express itself. It's actually in us, in us, for the most part, is actually an exile. That chachma, and it doesn't affect and bring to light or to life in a daily routine of what we engage in. It doesn't. The extension of this love, the extension of chachma, of the soul, it doesn't extend itself. That therefore I am acting this based on this, of just all there is what God needs from me. All there is an attachment to the divine, not so I could cleave even to God, because that's already that's a natural desire, or the human aspect of the soul's desire. But then there's the godly aspect of the soul's desire, is not to cleave to God, to be fulfilled, but to be subsumed again. And that's kind of hidden in us. That's in exile. It's not affecting our routine or daily engagement that we do through our actions, through our speech, and through our thoughts. So where is this part of the soul. And speaking specifically in someone who is a Rasha according to a Rasha according to Hasidic teachings, a Rasha meaning someone who is not a righteous individual or a Beinoni, but someone who lives life based on the natural instincts of life, which is not the godly soul, which is the humanness of us, which is based on the animal soul, right? In other words, we do what makes sense to me, what's good for me, what's pleasurable for me. That's how, 99.999% of the humanity leads their life. Meaning that this part of the soul is not activated. Is not activated. We're preoccupied with self-concern, mundane pleasures that we seek. Right? Which, hey, that's the human condition. So, the essence, though, of this part of the soul, the Chachma, even though it's imprisoned in the sense that it's not being mispashit, it's not expressing itself throughout my being, but it's still there. Where? Well, and the essence of the divine soul is found in the brain. So it's just a potent, and there in the brain, it's sort of asleep. It is dormant. It's asleep. When does it wake up, though? It wakes up when a person, when the Rasha, right, which that's who we are. Or if we want to be more positive, Beinoni in training, but the Rasha. Why? Because we have stain on our soul. Therefore, we're not righteous. Not even a Beinoni. Halavai we should be. But when the Rasha is confronted with a test of faith that actually transcends our awareness, our knowledge, and the way we perceive things, it's touching the very core of my identity, the very core of my being. That's what this. Then, that part of my neshama that is asleep awakes. It awakes and it exerts itself. The chachma in my neshama is awakened because of this test of faith. And it exerts the influence over myself to such a degree that the person is ready to self-sacrifice for God. And to sacrifice, not because I'm going to gain more by my sacrifice, because this is something beyond understanding, beyond logic, beyond reason. It's not reasonable. The motivation to sacrifice your life. Because during one's living of life, Klipa prevailed over them. The shell that covers over the truth of the godliness that's in everything in them and in life prevails. The worldly matters and in engagement of the mundane prevails. But at this point, where there's a test of faith, and a test of faith as it's been over 2,000 years, where give up your religion, take on another one, as we spoke in chapter 18, majority of times the Jew would give up their lives. They would choose God as their portion of their lot, even though they didn't live for God, and that's the type of person we're talking about, they lived for their mundane pleasures. That's what they lived for. And mundane pleasures doesn't mean bad things. I have a pleasure in the work that I do. And your work might be you're a doctor. The work might be a teacher, which is, hey, that's good. But it's your pleasure. It's not a godly thing. It's not giving pleasure, right? It's taking pleasure. And again, this is a very high-minded idea over here. It really expresses itself, how do you live your life? By what you need or what you're needed for. So mostly we live our lives for what we need. Whatever we need in life, that's what we engage in. And for the most part, those are mundane pleasures that one seeks. What God needs you for, where does that come from? That's not such a natural human thing. So we don't usually lead our lives at that moment. And to do it in such a manner that's based on the godly soul, to do it for God's sake, not for your sake. That would be based on the godly soul. That's why it's dormant, the godly soul, for the most part in us. When does it awaken is when there's a question of a real test of faith. Denouncing your Jewishness, denouncing your connection to your faith. So then the chachma of the soul, like it comes out. It's there. It's a reality all of a sudden. Where it wasn't a reality when you lived, but now it becomes a reality, and therefore a person will, through martyrdom, will sanctify God's name. Right? Even though, again, during their lifetime, klipa prevailed. During their life. They weren't able to overcome daily routine of life. But when it comes to the challenge of faith in one God, then that chachma, which again, the chachma is a vessel or a vehicle for the Ein Sof, the infinite of God that's clothed in it. When that reveals itself, all klipa, all the shells that cover over on the godliness vanishes, nullified, as if it's never been there. Because what's present then is the infinite quality of the soul, chokhmah, that is the vehicle that carries it, nullifies everything else. It's so intense that it repels all of the negativity, enabling to withstand that test of self-sacrifice. Even refusing to do an empty act of like bowing down to an idol, then you don't even believe it in your heart. And this is the idea that one of the questions we had at the beginning of chapter 18. We talk about the ava mesuteres, the hidden love, which is the defining this godly soul, and this love that we're saying is not about cleaving to become more, but to actually become nullified in our source of the divine. So where's the fear come in? So the fear is about being torn away from that connection. As to two sides of the coin, love and fear. The love over here is the desire to just be enveloped in your source of the divine, losing all sense of self, self-identity, self-fulfillment, losing all of that, which is something that we don't, beyond understanding. And then there's the fear that comes together with that, the fear of disconnecting from that. That therefore helps when the Chachma of the soul is revealed, at that test of faith, brings a person to they can repudiate the idolatry, even if it's only an outer expression of an action that to you is meaningless. How many times throughout our history told just to subscribe verbally to another faith, and Jews refused, for the most part. Not all, but for the most part. Even though it was just to verbally accept something, and in your heart you didn't believe it for a moment. But even to do that, a person had a fear to do that, because they didn't want to disconnect, even just in words. Powerful. So, that concludes chapter 19. Concludes chapter 19. Any questions, any comments? A lot to fabring about over here. I don't see on Facebook any questions. Instagram, I don't see. Luz, please share with us.
Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You said the word, Rabbi, powerful. This is a powerful passage. What I wanted to say, Rabbi, is that I understand love as the happiness we get when we do things that makes others happy. That's one. The other one I was going to say is I understand by this passage we should never judge another person by their actions because we don't know what's in their heart.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely correct. Yep. Very good. Thank you. John. Oh, yes, Bachelor, go ahead.
I wanted to, say that even if a Jew in his lifetime does not follow Yiddishkeit in any kind of way or what have you, and he's placed in a position of having to give up his life, most times it's amazing to see that they will make that decision if they're forced to make a decision like to be disconnected
Right.
From Hashem. But my question is, for the Jews that do not make that decision, I don't understand,
how that happens.
Yeah.
So the way the Alter Rebbe explained over here, just to repeat the question, just in case it was not clear or you didn't hear it, in chapter 18, the Alter Rebbe said for the majority of times this is what will happen, and throughout history we see for majority of times it did happen, but there were many occasions like the Inquisition in Spain and the expulsion of the Jews in 1492. So you have the Marranos, that openly converted to Christianity, but secretly were acting as Jews. So why would, how do they fit in over here? What happened to the chachma of their neshama? So my understanding and how I would explain it is that the way the Alter Rebbe explains over here, the chachma of our soul, of the Jewish soul, is always there. It's what defines us and makes the soul a Jewish soul, right? But that doesn't mean that it ever exerts, like we say, for the most part, it doesn't exert itself in our lives. You can be, by the way, an observant religious Jew, fulfilling all the mitzvahs, and you don't exercise your godly soul in the observance. You're just doing it based on your animal soul or intellectual soul, nefesh hamaskelis as it's called. That's possible. Because what we're talking about here, the godly soul, is an attachment that is beyond the human condition. It's not based on comfort. Some people, for them, it's extremely comfortable to live a Jewish life. And they do it as a comfort for them. They appreciate it. They understand it. So that's not the godly soul. The godly soul is nothing to do with, oh, this is wonderful stuff. And therefore, you know what? I want to engage in this. I want to observe Shabbos. Such a beautiful experience I've had with Shabbos. I want to, observe Shabbos. That's not the godly soul necessarily talking. That's the human soul. The nefesh hamaskelis, the intellectual soul that may be talking within us, that is bringing me fulfillment. It's bringing me a greater sense of feeling good about my life, feeling good about me. Which, that's normal. That's great. So be it that people should come to it based on that. But here we're talking about something very different. That's not what the godly soul is doing. Godly soul is beyond that. It's not based on intelligence. Remember, Chachma is not human comprehension. It's beyond comprehension. It's the source of comprehension, but it's not comprehension in and of itself. So that's important to appreciate and understand that. So, to access that part in us is takes some awareness, takes some doing, and it's possible. It's always there in us. It's what defines a Jew in their Jewish soul, but it doesn't mean that it is expressing itself, exerting its influence in a daily life. Now, even when it comes to a test of faith, it's there, and it may be still asleep, and it wasn't awakened. So it's possible. It is possible, believe it or not. That doesn't take away from such a person still being defined by that chachma of their soul, and therefore the Jewishness of their soul. It doesn't take away from who they are. It just means it's not expressing on that. So it's asleep. Usually it's going to be awakened, but it can still be asleep. As we see. All right. All right. Thank you, John. Does the hidden love and the reverence wake up when the Jewish person is about to commit a sin punishable by Karas? Good question. Forthcoming chapters, we're going to be dealing about that, and not just that, but not necessarily, because that's actually flies in the face of what we just said over here, John. It's the opposite. I just want to point out, we're not getting this so easily. We're not. And the reason is because this is beyond reason. This is not something that is part of the human condition. And therefore, it's hard to wrap our brain around this idea that we have an attachment, not because it's making something more and enhancing my life. What do you mean? It's not enhancing my life. It's not. It is life, but it's not enhancing your life. What I mean to say it's not enhancing, let me modify that statement. What I mean that it's not enhancing your life, it doesn't seek enhancement. Does it enhance? It does enhance, but it doesn't seek enhancement. Every other kind of love is seeking enhancement. Every other type of engagement in the world, we seek enhancement. We seek fulfillment, self-fulfillment. We're filling ourselves up, whether it's love, whether with a mitzvah, whether with doing goodness and kindness. We're filling ourselves up. That's not what we're talking about here at all. You're not. That's why someone will give up their lives, even though they didn't live for God, they're going to die for God. That doesn't make sense. If you lived for something, then maybe if it's so important to you, you might die for it. But here we're talking about something way beyond that. So John, you're a good question, very insightful in what you're asking. But think about it, it's the opposite of the point over here. If this hidden love that we're talking about wakes up because the Jew might now do something that's going to disconnect them from God. And if the motivation is punishment, then that's self-preservation. I don't want to be punished, so I'm not going to do that sin. Is that about God? Is that about your love of God? Is that about your attachment to God? No, nothing at all. It's about you not wanting to be punished. So that's about you. That's human. It's not this. That's not the godly soul that we're talking about. The godly soul doesn't care about the punishment of. It doesn't care of the punishment. It cares about the cutting off, and which Torah is. So it's a very nuanced thing that I'm saying over here, in the way you've put it there, John. So it's in that sense, and in the forthcoming chapters, we're going to get a clearer idea where we're going with this. And how we can take these teachings and actually make it into something that we should live by. Because right now, what we've explained these two chapters, is we have something that what we're going to die by, what we could die with. How do you live with this idea? That's the key. And your question, John, will be answered in chapters 20 through 25. So stay tuned. Very good. Excellent. Excellent. You're all amazing. David, does Hashem want us to nullify us solely like a eunuch, or still retain some will of our own and have freedom of choice to serve, love, and fear Him? Well, isn't it a choice all the time that we should choose to do God's will, do what He needs from us? So I'm not certain why is that being. Why you would consider your will. Don't make yourself that you have no will, but make your will congruent and a reflection of God's will. That's the ultimate. Elise. So our godly soul is always there in the background, as it were, right? That's true. And it makes our soul a Jewish soul. That's what defines us, right? As a Jewish soul. That we may not manifest in the physical reality of our lives. It's possible. Yeah. It's possible. Think about it. If what my thoughts in my mind come to me is, let me do this mitzvah, because if I'm not going to do it, I'm going to feel guilty. Let's say, someone comes up to you and asks you for charity. And you got a dollar bill on you, or a $5 bill, whatever, right? Someone on the street, and you give it to them, either in order, you know what? Here's a chance I could do something good and I'll feel good, right? So that's got to do about attachment. That's got to do about feeling good. Now, it doesn't mean it's not a mitzvah. Talking about here deeper, what's inside you, what's the motive, what is the act is the act, but where are you in that act? So, you know, it made me feel good, and that was my motivation. Or I'm going to give because I was thinking, maybe not, but then I'm going to feel guilty. I feel the guilt not to give. So I'm giving from out of guilt. That's not the godly soul. That's all got to do with the animal soul. Right? That has to, and most of our giving will be based on that. How is, when is someone motivated to give because this brings divine pleasure? That this is, an attachment, not that I will come closer to God, right? Because then that's, again, self-fulfilling, but something beyond that. Not for a reason, beyond a reason. Just to give divine satisfaction? The way we could use this in a way to express it and to express the godly soul is that it's not about me. God, what do you need from me? And whatever that is, I'm ready to give myself over. Mesirus Nefesh means self-sacrifice. The ultimate in self-sacrifice is martyrdom. Actually, I shouldn't say that. The ultimate is in living with that self-sacrifice, meaning not I'm sacrificing, ball and chain sacrificing, but I'm giving up the human needs, and rather to be needy and to fulfill my needs, but to fill the divine need. That's divine soul talking. Right? How often does that talk within us? All right, more to go. We're going to learn how to live with this divine soul. That's where we're going with all of this. Not to die with it, but to live with it. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich and Kadeshim Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you Tanya. There is TRC today at 4:30. You don't want to miss it. And there's also Rambam coming right up. God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you all for participating and asking and being involved. Be well.